had a lot of experience with my mother going through breast cancer and what that looked like. And then she actually got leukemia that was caused by the chemo she did for her breast cancer and passed away from that later on. So I had quite a bit of experience of what that process looked like, which was helpful and created a lot of fear at the same time. I'm like, oh, my mother died of this.
I dreamt that you were twisted through 7 suns.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Soulful podcast. And we are doing some special episodes in October because October, if you're not aware, is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and it's something that I've wanted to talk about for a long time. So I'm really delighted to welcome, I'm going to just say one of my favorite clients to the show, Jenn Nelson. Hi, Jenn, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Now, I wanted Jenn to come on and tell her story for many different reasons. Jenn is a breast cancer survivor and a woman in sobriety, and I thought she would be a great fit as we explore the relationship between particularly breast cancer and alcohol. Let's start with, can we start with breast cancer kind of came first, right, in terms of your journey. Now, Jenn, you're still in your 30s, so you were relatively young, right, to be diagnosed?
I was very young. I was 33. It was my first ever routine breast cancer screening. My mother was diagnosed with breast cancer at age 40. And I had been talking with my GP, and she was like, oh, now we recommend preventative screenings 10 years before an immediate family member is diagnosed. So I was a couple years behind, and they were like, no big deal. Just go to this high-risk women's clinic we provide. They'll do the screenings. You can do genetic testing, all of that. They'll take care of it. I'm like, awesome. No big deal. Go over there, do all of that. And I do recall in the pamphlet they gave me, the only time they talked about alcohol was there was like one section in like a New York Times article they gave me that talked a little bit about the risks of drinking and alcohol. Outside of that, it wasn't talked about at all. And I go do the mammogram. That comes back fine because I'm young and I have dense breast tissue, which is very common in young women. They recommend doing an MRI screening. I went ahead and did that, and that's what caught the cancer. And I was very, very lucky. It was very rare, very nasty, very aggressive. And they told me by the time I would have found the lump myself, like I wouldn't have survived.
Wow. That's, God bless early screening and medicine. That must have been earth-shattering news to get, because you weren't expecting it.
No, not at all. It's one of those things that, like, the most impactful things in my life have been things you least expect. And I was absolutely shocked, but given my family history, it wasn't entirely surprising. What was interesting is I just kind of surrendered to it and knew that it would be okay because it was caught early, and just went through the process. I had a lot of experience with my mother going through breast cancer and what that looked like. And then she actually got leukemia that was caused by the chemo she did for her breast cancer and passed away from that later on. So I had quite a bit of experience of what that process looked like, which was helpful and created a lot of fear at the same time. I'm like, oh, my mother died of this. And so I was very cautious, and luckily I live in the Seattle area. We have great medical care here, and so I was able to get in at like the top hospital and be seen there and feel really safe and confident in the treatment choices that I was selecting and all of that. But yeah, it's scary, and there's this whole like waiting period from when you're diagnosed, they tell you, and then you have to like wait to meet with the surgeon, and then you have to get like either a biopsy again or the mass removed in my case. And then you have to wait for more testing to come back. And like this whole process is like over a month long of just sitting and waiting and like, well, what all am I going to have to do here? What does it look like? And that was the hardest part. I'm kind of one of those people, like once I know what's going to happen, I can make a plan and start like being like, okay, like I can get through this. This is the plan and what's going to happen. Yeah, but it was, really changed my world. It somewhat changed my drinking at the time. I would love to say that like, oh, I just quit drinking because I had cancer. That was not the case. You like see and hear those people that continue to smoke when they have cancer. It is so hard to get sober and give up alcohol. even in a healthy space, I just couldn't do it while dealing with all of that. I was drinking less. I was more aware of it. I definitely knew it wasn't serving me and problematic. I remember my stepmom asking the doctor when at one of the appointments they came to, oh, can she drink through, like, while she's going through treatment? And they said, they kind of looked at her and they were like, yeah, if she probably won't feel like it, but if she wants to, yeah, she can have a drink. Isn't that earth shattering? Like, I am
I know.
having chemotherapy injected into my body and going through radiation, and they're telling me I can have a drink, and so that kind of gave, me more mental permission to continue. And so I got through all of that, and then I started looking at the drinking.
So so there's a few things I want to unpack there, but one of the things that I want to highlight here is the big disconnect with the medical profession and alcohol and cancer. And we were both doing some research before, and I was looking at like different breast cancer sites in the UK, Canada, America, and none of them say don't drink. Don't drink. They will say there's a link, cut down, drink less, but it's like we just can't quite envisage life without alcohol. No, but it's like that's seen as like the most drastic, awful thing. So even though you have cancer and cancer is linked to alcohol, well, just a little bit less. And again, misinformation, telling someone who's having chemotherapy that it's fine to have a drink. Can I ask you, what was your life like when what was going on? Like you said you were you partying? Were you drink? Like what was going on at that
Yeah,
time?
I wasn't a huge partier. I actually didn't drink in high school, maybe a couple times, and in college I did drink, but actually not that much. Though I will say when I did, it was like blackout binge drinking.
Right.
Where my alcohol use really picked up was after college, and when I had my first job. It was a very challenging job. It was really isolating. I didn't have much like connection or peers or mentorship in it. And the little bit I had was meeting friends for happy hour after work and drinking. And so my alcohol use started to really pick up, and this habit of coming home from work, being stressed out, and using alcohol to unwind. And over time, it did escalate a bit. There was some partying in there, but that wasn't primarily it. It was mostly a way to cope, which is like the worst coping mechanism there is. Looking back, I was just on a
Yeah.
constant roller coaster from the
Mm.
alcohol. But that, and most people didn't even know I was having an issue with it. I was just pretty secretive about my inner feelings about it. I was drinking mostly at home alone, like a bottle of wine after work.
Mm.
And to a lot of people, that would seem maybe in slight excess, but not awful. And, there was, when I look back, some moments of not great things going on as well here and there. But for the most part, it was pretty boring and
Mm.
pretty lonely.
Mm.
But I knew internally that this was not working for me and it was holding me back and not serving me. And I also have a ton of addiction in my family.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew where like that train goes and that I needed to get off of it before it got worse.
So you go through the treatment. How long was the treatment?
Yeah, it was about from start to finish, from being diagnosed in the summer. I was done in December. So I had a lumpectomy when they go in and remove the lump. And then I had to do 4 rounds of chemotherapy, which is the bare minimum. And then I had to do radiation after that. So start to finish, about 6 months. I did lose my hair. It oddly was not as traumatic as I would have thought. I just embraced it. I've always been a naturally positive, optimistic person, and it just kind of like happened. I get a lot of feedback still of like how I went through cancer, and yeah, my hair fell out, and I just went into work bald and embraced it, and I knew it was all temporary. Even when I would like feel awful from the chemotherapy, I would just lay in bed and be like, this is just temporary. It's going to go away and it will pass. which is so interesting that I was able to surrender in that way when I wasn't in sobriety. I really had a bumpy road of surrendering and going into like a full sober life.
So can you tell us about that? So you said you went through the cancer treatment and then the next thing you addressed was your drinking.
Yes. So I get done with cancer treatment. It's kind of like this, I'm just looking to the finish line. And I get there. And one day you're like done with radiation and you walk out and you're like, bye. And like, I didn't instantly feel better, which of course I wouldn't. But in my mind, I thought, I would. And I remember my acupuncturist telling me, like, Jen, your body is a garden and you just doused it in toxic chemicals. It's gonna take a while to heal and grow back. And I liked that analogy. And so I started working with a therapist. Only a couple times I saw her, but she did recommend a couple things that were useful, which was meditation and yin yoga. And I started to do those things. So I started to do a lot of yin yoga. I started to work out with a personal trainer and really focus on my health. And that was going really well. But what was becoming even more incongruent was the alcohol. So I'm doing all these healthy things, I'm feeling better, and then a couple days a week, I'm like binge drinking wine, and it's a pretty vicious cycle when you're doing that. And I kept trying to remove it on my own and not tell anyone, very common path of like listening to podcasts. That's how I found you, reading quit lit books, all these things, of like, okay. And it would just keep sneaking back in. I would call it mental hijacking. It's like complete overwhelm because I had no coping tools of like how to really handle emotions, have boundaries and balance in my life and those things. And then I'd be back at the store buying wine. So it was a bumpy road.
So how long did it take you to get sober? What was the process?
Yeah, so I think I started working with you 4 years ago, and I had cancer 6 years ago. So there's probably a good, like 2 year and a half in there of, kind of trying to do it on my own. And then I heard you on a podcast. I don't even know which one, but I just knew. Like, I sometimes call these like little downloads from the universe that I get, and I'm just like, I looked at your website and there was like the book a free discovery call button, and I looked at it for a couple days and I was like, I know I'm supposed to push that button, but I'm resisting it. And so I then booked a call with you and got in a I think it was a 4-month program the first time, and it was wildly helpful and changed my world. Like, I had no idea that my childhood was impacting my current life, and that it, there was a lot of things to unpack there and look at and work on. And that cleared up, I would say, probably about 80% of the drinking. Like, I was having pretty long spurts of sobriety. I think at one point I had like a 7-month stint, and then I was at a wedding and ended up drinking. But it was a little bit more of like white knuckling for me still then, of like kind of holding on, I was also in that like not being open and honest with everyone part of the process of like, oh, I just don't really drink anymore, and not being fully transparent with people about, no, I cannot drink anymore. I'm choosing to be a sober person and all of that, and kind of like leaving that door open a little bit. And so that I could kind of sneak back into it. And then I was just miserable. Like, I was dating somebody who also had their own drinking problem.
I remember this.
Yes, and that is a recipe for disaster. And that was causing me to slip back into drinking at times, because it's like, I look at it now, I can see it. Like, I was lowering myself to his level when I was doing that and trying to connect with him. And it would be like, I would go like 6 weeks not drink, and then drink a night or two with him, and talk about misery. Like, your body is not used to the alcohol. And something happened when I started working on being sober. When I would drink, it started to get scary. Like, that flip of a switch, and like how quickly I was like blacking out and drinking more than I used to. It was starting to really scare me. And it was just so incongruent. I would describe it as also like alcohol disconnected me from my soul. And it just wasn't working. So I was listening to your podcast walking one day, and I heard you talking about like now enrolling in a 6-month sobriety mindset program of some kind. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's the universe telling me to reach out to Veronica. So I joined that program, and that was immensely helpful. And I was able to get it to stick through that. I think that program, that was a lot of hours, and it was really helpful. And I think the group therapy aspect is really impactful of just hearing other people's stories and experiences and being open and vulnerable. I also joined Refuge Recovery. It's available on the small little community I live in, and I really resonate with that and the Buddhist approach and just like having that routine of going weekly and all of that. And all of it just kind of set in. And then the other thing that really set it in for me was, so I had a lumpectomy when I had breast cancer, and then because of that, I was still going to need preventative screening. So twice a year, I was getting either an MRI or a mammogram. And I had a couple scares. I had a couple biopsies that were needed that came back that weren't cancer, but I could tell my doctor was surprised. And this is on the other side. So just because that cancer that I originally had was gone doesn't mean that I can get a different cancer. And then there was like a mammogram issue, and I had to go back and get a rescan. And I remember just leaving the building and was like, this isn't working. Like, am I going to do this for the next 50 years of my life? Like, constantly be getting screened and, like, you know, it's just not worth it. And especially if I get cancer, again, I'm going to be choosing to have a double mastectomy and reconstruction, and then I'm going to be dealing with cancer treatments on top of it. So I had known that there was an option to have a version of reconstruction in which they use your stomach fat and put it in your breasts for the reconstruction. I knew that from when I underwent cancer the first time. So I was like, you know, there's a lot of different options these days. I'm going to go meet with my wonderful doctors and just explore if this is a path I should go on. And it was like the best decision I ever made. My oncologist was really reluctant at first. She felt it was like a pretty extreme thing to do, but when I met with the mastectomy doctor and some of the other team, they were like, no, this is a pretty common path for somebody your age. You're young, you know, it's expensive to do all these tests all the time, the risk, you know, it's just not, you know, it's something that's everyone's individual choice, obviously, but it made sense for me. So I chose to have a preventative double mastectomy and reconstruction because I chose this during COVID. It took a while to get it scheduled, and there was like some like rescheduling and everything, but it was the best decision I've ever made besides stopping and drinking. So just what they can do these days is remarkable. They literally took all of my stomach fat. They took it all. And I was like, you're going to take it all, right?
That's
we don't need to leave any. Yeah. And it is a massive 14-hour surgery. And I had to be in the ICU for like 4 days. Wow. And I had to, you know, take like 5 weeks off work and everything. It's a huge surgery and process. But anyways, they're able to do all of this. And yeah, I have like a fully remodeled midsection of my body. It's amazing looking. It's unreal what they can do. And I'm so happy with it. Like I walk around in bikinis now. Like I just like, I'm like, yeah, this is awesome. So I had a really positive experience with, you know, the whole process and the breast reconstruction and everything. Doing it preventatively was so helpful because I was able to do it when I was in good health. It was my choice. It was really empowering. I could schedule it. You know, I think there's a lot of women that have fear around that choice and like giving up part of your body and all of that. I am so glad I did it. I actually don't have the BRCA genes either in terms of genetic testing. If I would have, they would have recommended I do this in the beginning. And, you know, I think some women are afraid to get tested out of fear of like, well, then I have to make the choice. And I didn't look up the stats, but it's very high. It's like an 80% chance if you have these BRCA genes that you're going to get breast cancer. And so I just want to share, like, it's, you know, can be a really positive experience, you know, and gets rid of that worry in the back of your head. Like, I don't have to get screenings anymore. I don't have to worry about cancer for the rest of my life. I have these great new boobs that apparently aren't really going to age. And so I'm just like, this is great, and so there are so many different options, especially like from, 20, 30 years ago where it wasn't the case. And so, yeah, anyways, going back to that. So, and on the genetic piece, it's interesting. I've had genetic testing twice, and it's all relatively new. And so the way it's been described to me is they know about the BRCA genes, they know about a few other things, but just because I don't have those specific ones doesn't mean that there's not something genetic going on in my body. And so as they do more and more testing, I'm sure as AI comes out and they can look at data in different ways, there'll be more of those kinds of things coming out. But in terms of my history and my family, my mom was young. What's interesting is she didn't drink alcohol ever. I never saw her drink. She did have an opiate addiction issue as well. But so I don't know if alcohol caused me to get breast cancer. I'm sure it added gasoline to the genetic fire going on in my body and was not helpful at all. And just going forward, like you and I have talked about, like, I cannot be drinking alcohol, and my family doesn't have a lot of women in it, but there is a lot of history of cancer, and I just have a naturally high predisposition to cancer.
Yeah, and I think that's what I want this message to be is, and I have a lot of clients who are recovering from mostly breast cancer, but other types of cancer. And this is not about blaming, because we don't know. However, we do know that there is a very, very strong link. And if you have even the whiff of cancer around you, you can't drink. And that I say that to the women on my calls all the time when they say, I'm 2 years in remission or whatever. And I'm like, and you can't drink. Not even one. We got to be done with this. We've got to be done with this, because, this was really shocking to me. But, okay, compared to women who don't drink at all, women who have 3 alcoholic drinks per week, 3, which I think everybody would think is like barely drinking, right? That's like 3, have a 15% higher risk of breast cancer. Experts estimate that the risk of breast cancer goes up another 10% for each additional drink women regularly have each day. I mean, I think I was shocked when I read that. This is kind of what we've done. This goes back to, we think an alcohol problem is a homeless person. I have a nice job and a nice car and I go on nice holidays, and I should probably drink less, but it's not problematic because I have a nice car and a nice job and blah, blah, blah. It's in our heads, I think collectively we've kind of done, that's a problem, I just need to cut down a little bit. 3 drinks, and we were remarking on all these sites that are not recommending don't drink, especially now when if you drink 3 alcoholic drinks, it's like I'm like, I drink to get a buzz. You can't get a buzz off of 3 drinks, and we're like, why bother? There's so many great alcohol-free products. I mean, there's just a mind-blowing amount of alcohol-free products. Switch to if you want to have 3 glasses of wine, have 3 glasses of non-alcoholic wine or 3 non-alcoholic beers, right? Problem solved. It's fascinating to me.
It's extremely fascinating. When I looked at those statistics and they're like, some of the other ones were like 2 drinks a week or 1 a day, and they mean like a 5-ounce pour of wine. Like, I was drinking a bottle, I'm like, I'm looking at this and, I'm sure I looked at these at some point and was just like, for me and most people who have an alcohol problem, like, you can't moderate it, like you said, just to get the effect that you're looking for, kind of like, it's much, much more than that.
Yeah, I mean, the American Cancer Society says people who choose to drink alcohol, I mean, there you go, there's a lot of people we're not choosing, but no more than 2 drinks per day for men and 1 drink per day for women. And that, again, there's a disconnect with the actual science there, because 1 drink a day for women is still an excessive amount. And I really would like doctors and medicine to get on board with the non-drinking, but of course, not drinking is just seen as so radical, and people perceive, gosh, you will be missing out on so much that, we don't want to put this burden on you as well. I want to go back to a bit earlier in your story when you the first program you did with me, and because I remember that, and oh, Jenn, you've changed so much. The big thing I want to say about Jenn that she's worked really, really hard on is relationships and accepting crumbs from the table. And instead, now she is a queen, and she has attracted someone who's worthy of her because she is a queen. Is I remember you being, and I felt that you had one foot in one world and one foot in the other. And you kind of had this friendship group you didn't quite want to let go of. And it was kind of, you told yourself a story about that, but you really didn't want to drink. And you were really actually very naturally into yoga and hiking and eating well. Like it didn't really fit, but it was this kind of one foot in one camp and one foot in the other camp. Do you remember that? Is that, did I read that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's, when you're drinking, your world gets very small. And the people in my life, drink similarly to me, worked similarly, like stressful jobs, also had, problems in romantic relationships and all of that. And yeah, I think a lot of when I look back at my drinking, it was related to loneliness and disconnection for myself and others. And I needed to solve that. And getting involved in different sober communities and making new friends and connections that were really like deep and honest and open and authentic really changed that for me. I was like, oh, I don't need these other people in my life. And I also had, when I got cancer, it had become really clear then who my real friends were and who my partying friends were. So most of that had already kind of become clear to me. I wasn't totally letting go of all the partying friends, but I like knew who was a true friend. And it surprised me. Some of the people I would have thought would have been there more weren't, and other ones really came to the surface. And as I started kind of unraveling my drinking and doing more healthy activities, the ones who were not big drinkers, actually, like I was driving the drinking in our relationship, were happy to like do non-sober activities with me and like go to yoga, go to dinner, go on walks, go to sound baths, do different things. And so for me, it was just a real process of like building a new life and community that didn't include alcohol. And it is hard when, you have these long-term connections and friendships, and some of the people are heavy drinkers still. And I think for me, it was just a process of realizing those people are on their own path. But also I don't want to be around it anymore. And just becoming confident in my own sobriety took a while, and now I'm super confident in it. Like I'm super open and honest about all of it. I tell people right away that I don't drink. I think a really shining example and positive example of what a sober person who's like really happy and enjoying life looks like these days. But it definitely took a while, and it was really that connection piece and finding new connections.
That's an example of what happens is when we get sober, we grow. Because when we're drinking, we don't have enough bandwidth to grow emotionally because we're sacrificing it to thinking about drinking, thinking about not drinking, being hungover, etc. So when we get sober, we get that bandwidth back, which is just energy and space to think thoughts. And we're able to grow. And what happens is we grow past people. And again, everyone's on their own path, going their own direction. The growth that I've seen in you and the time that we've worked together is really, it's amazing. But I just want to clarify, you worked for it. It didn't just happen. It wasn't luck. You showed up, you looked at some hard truths, you changed behavior, you applied the program, and you worked for it. And I think what happened is you just grew past people, but then that just meant it created space for other people to come into your life, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I've done so much growing, and I continue to. And even in this like new version of my world and connections, I am still growing past people, I'm realizing, and that's okay. It's like, I love your analogy of like you're driving the bus in life and people get on and off at different times. And, you know, and giving people space to have their own process, I think I was really attached to like holding on to relationships. And I had a real problem of trying to fix people and feeling responsible for other people's emotions and having to help them and fix them and all these things. And that was something we worked on a lot together, of just like letting go of all of that and remaining focused on myself. And yeah, that's really shifted everything for me. And like you talked about, I now have like a beautiful relationship with somebody, and I think I have immense gratitude and appreciation for that relationship because of how much work I had to put into myself to bring somebody like that into my life. And yeah, it's so interesting to look back. I was so resistant about romantic relationships and accepting breadcrumbs. I had this whole thinking in my head around like, I looked at relationships as I would need to caretake for somebody.
Yeah.
And that was what I was attracting, was a bunch of like man babies who wanted, as you said, a free therapist and like caretaker, and that typically had their own alcohol problems and things. And my partner now is absolutely wonderful, and he's able to process his own things and take care of himself, and we have a really nice, supportive relationship. But it's very adult. It's not caretaking. It's completely different. It's one of those things where it feels very different to me, and I have to like let that in and be like, this is actually the feeling that I want. This feels really safe, really consistent, really comfortable, and easy. And that's like the opposite of the other things I was bringing into my life, But all of that was familiar for so long, that like chaos and inconsistency and all of the disasters, And so it's the opposite now. And that like rewiring of your brain and being like, oh, that is what I actually want, and allow that to come in.
And those are getting to, I mean, anybody who's listened to my stuff or read my book or whatever, I mean, it's the underlying stuff, right? The stopping drinking is 10%, 90% of it is emotional sobriety. And I want to tell you, it's painful for me to watch you like with man baby number 3. But I also could see you getting there. I could see the wheels turning. I could see that your tolerance was leaving you for putting up with just that kind of stuff. But we have to go through these processes because that's how we learn, right? And sometimes pain is a great motivator.
Yeah, it definitely is. And it's like I look back at my path to where I am now, and it was bumpy and it was really hard. Like I always wanted the story of like, oh, I just quit drinking, And I know people who have that story, not a ton, but that was not my story. And I think it's, a lot of the back and forth, a lot of, having to relook at things. And it is hard to change yourself. It is hard work. And, but I've done it, and I did it by like showing up every week to your programs, by going to other sober things and connection. And it's true. Eventually you just rewire your brain and you just, I think for me, I finally had to like internally accept, there was a lot of, I could intellectualize everything, but it's that like putting it in action and really internally accepting things. And for me, I just had to really accept that like my brain chemistry when it comes to alcohol is permanently fucked up. Like I cannot have any amount of it in my body or it will create instant craving for more. And I never want to feel in that craving state towards alcohol and that imbalance that it caused me and the anxiety and all the issues again. And just that like accepting of that has been really helpful for me. And just knowing that that is who I am.
Yeah, what you did is you kept putting weight on the sober end. You just kept you kept showing up. You kept putting weight in the sober end. You stumbled. You took a couple of wrong turns, but you kept putting weight on the sober end, and eventually it tipped, and you got there, and you're in this different place. And I mean, I know your life is really full now. Give people a little picture of like what today is like for you.
Yeah, I live on this beautiful island in the Pacific Northwest that's really peaceful and still very close to Seattle. And, I have a great work balance. I have great work boundaries, and I walk on the beach every morning. I go to yoga regularly. I work out. I have a lot of wonderful like friends and connections. Some are sober, some aren't, but all of them are super supportive of me. I have this lovely relationship with my partner. It's just my life is really peaceful and full of joy and connection and simple. And I enjoy that.
Mm.
And then I'm just continuing to grow. I'm currently enrolled in a coaching training program to learn how to be a
Mm-hmm.
coach,
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily in the sober space, just kind of like challenging myself to
Mm-hmm.
learn a new skill, which is exciting and fun
Mm-hmm.
to learn. And I'm just really open and on this path of, yeah, continuing to grow and discover myself and challenge things. And the other word that often comes up for me lately is kind of attachment and detachment. It's funny, I just had a tarot card reading by this local lady, and she was like, "You've let go of so many attachments in the last year." And I was like, that is very true. Like in the
Mm.
Buddhist sense, attachment is a big word in there of like craving and wanting things to be a certain way in that
Mm.
sense. And
Mm.
letting go of that and just having like total peace of like I can only control myself, and I'm responsible for myself and my own life and emotions, and choosing who and what I let into my life. And yeah, that unattached but appreciative of the joy and peace of my life.
Mm. What would you say to a woman who's been diagnosed this week, who's, whatever age? What would be what words could you give her?
you know I think it's so scary, and all you can do is be in the present moment with it and take it day by day, and look, advocate for yourself in terms of getting really good health care. And if something doesn't feel right, don't do it. Actually, the first oncologist I met with, she was awful. I had a lot of reservations around chemotherapy because it killed my mother, and she was not hearing me. She was like basically forcing it down my throat, told me I was going to die if I didn't do it if it came back. And I was like, no, I'm going to get another opinion and be seen somewhere else. So don't be afraid to advocate for yourself in terms of healthcare, and, take time to really understand the different options. Definitely bring someone with you to all your appointments. It is so overwhelming.
Mm.
Luckily I had a really good friend that came with me to all my appointments and would help me then after kind of like remember and
Yeah,
digest everything.
yeah.
And so
Good
definitely
advice.
do that. And yeah, yes, you have cancer, but you can also take the time to like figure out what's the right path for you, and you don't need to rush into decisions.
Mm. Thank you. And I know you were on the helpline, aren't you, to support other women who are thinking of having the double mastectomies as preventative care.
Yeah, the mentorship program. I talked to a woman who had done it preventatively as well before I chose to, and it was immensely helpful. So, yeah, I am a volunteer mentor for that, and also women going through cancer that had like a similar kind of diagnosis and situation as me as well.
Yeah, wonderful. And I just want to add to that, if you have been diagnosed, then one of the most important things you can do is change your relationship with alcohol today, and to say goodbye to it and not drink. There is no healthy drinking levels, none, zero. And the best thing you can do to support yourself in the treatment process, in recovery, despite what medical professionals may be telling you, is to not drink. And if you need help with that, there's lots of different ways to do that. And there's lots of great alcohol-free products to explore as well. So, Jenn, you have been awesome. I enjoy all my clients. I really do. I've really enjoyed you. I've really enjoyed watching your journey from where you were and it was like you just see these kind of, like, I could see it happening. Something would drop into your brain. You'd go, like, these just like breakthroughs and aha moments, and you putting these pieces together, and seeing your sort of wobbles, and but just you would just keep coming around, and you would keep coming around, and I just can see you in such a different place now, and you deserve, you deserve everything that, this wonderful life, again, that you didn't fall into your lap. You worked for it. You put the effort in, and you work to create the life that you want. So I'm really excited to see your next chapter and where you go from here, because you're just a wonderful gift to the sobriety community. I know Jenn, I have a lot of clients in her area, and Jenn organized like a hike last week, and they sent me some photos, and I'm super excited. And you're just a great human to have on the planet. So I'm really, thank God for early screening. Thank God for early screening.
Yeah, that's my other note to women is do your screenings.
Yeah.
Cancer is obviously very hard and scary, but if it's going to happen to you, you want to be in the situation where I was, where it's caught early and it's very treatable and, not that big of deal.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you again, Jenn. We would love to hear what you think of the show. So when this goes out on social media, please comment. Please let us know your thoughts and your experiences. And I'll be back next week with another great episode. Thanks again, Jenn.
Thank you.